Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial for Focal Point Digital. Today we're going to be using this best-selling digital backdrop with Santa and Christmas tree reading a book. And I thought that we would just make something quick and simple for you to follow along. In the year of COVID, a lot of us are having to go to digital backdrops because of restrictions, and some people are learning on the fly, and that's okay. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks here to try to make your workflow a little bit easier, maybe a lot easier, some pre-planning and things like that to make your digital composites look as realistic and pleasing to your customers as absolutely possible. So first things first. With any digital backdrop, you want to be checking for the direction of light, and the easiest way to spot that is to look for the shadows in the backdrop. And so here, if you just follow my cursor, we have shadowing right here. I can see shadowing right here and right here and right here. So what that tells me about this backdrop is that the light is actually coming from the top and the right of this backdrop, and you can see that there's light on Santa's face here. So when you're shooting your subject, you want to prepare your subject with the same direction of light so that the composite in the end looks as believable as it possibly can. And in order to achieve that, what I've done here, I've actually added a prop to this composite to make it look even a little bit more interactive. And off the set here, I have this little lady's parents at about the same eye level as Santa would be. And so that you really get that connection, and it makes it look like she was actually there with Santa. So that's the little hint and trick there, is just have the parents here. I think I had them holding candy, and she's making eye contact, and she just gave the best expression here. And as you can see, what I've done is I have the light here, and you can tell that from the little highlights on this chair, the light is top and it's right, and it's flagged about, say, 80 degrees or maybe 90 degrees, and we have shadows falling here, and so that will match quite nicely with the shadowing in this backdrop. As well, I don't have the exact wood as there is in this backdrop, but that's no big deal. I just used a set of wood backdrops that I had, and I did that in order to keep the color toning similar. And again, that's all just for believability when you get done with your composite. So let's get started here. What I'm going to do is cut out this subject, and I'm going to use this quick select tool. And I'm going to use the right bracket to increase my brush size just a little bit. And then I'm going to run around the parts of the image with her that I want to use in my composite. And this part can be a little tedious, I assure you, and it's probably no one's favorite part of doing compositing, but this is the part where patience will really pay off, because the cutout is so important to making your backdrops look realistic. So when I've selected too much, I'm just hitting the Alt key to subtract, and I'll just hit the left bracket key to lower down my brush again. I don't want this part, but I do want this part. So it's just going to be a little bit of finessing here, and again, my apologies, this part of the video will be probably a little bit slow, but it is this cutting out situation that really helps you with your believability in your final composite. Don't we all wish we could actually have Santa in the studio? The other thing about digital backdrops is they're quite a bit less expensive than hiring a Santa. Santa can be anywhere from 100 to 200, 300. Sometimes I've paid $500 an hour for a Santa, and these backdrops are only a fraction of that. So that helps too. Okay, I might finesse that a little bit later when I pull this into the backdrop. Let me subtract this out. So I'm just telling Photoshop the parts of this image that I really want, and then I'm going to finesse in the select and mask. So I'm going to come into select and mask, and I'm going to make sure that I'm refining this edge, and I'm going to run this brush along the edges. And I assure you, this is not a perfect process. Sometimes Photoshop can be quite good, and sometimes it leaves a little to be desired. And again, just running around the edges to make sure that we have a nice snug selection. I have my radius at 3 pixels, and I might lower that down to 1 pixel here so it's not sloppy. And again, this is not going to be absolute perfection. There's always going to be parts of your selection that you're going to have to go in and refine manually. So now that we have the marching ants where we want them, we're going to output to new layer with layer mask. And that's going to allow to add and subtract into the backdrop as we choose without any destructive editing. And you can see there's a bit of sloppiness in here with the refined edge, and it's because there wasn't a lot of contrast between her and that wood backdrop, but this is not the end of the world, and it's also the reason why I shot on wood. So if I need to, I can actually use part of the original image of her to blend in with the wood here, and no one will be any of the wiser. So let's grab her and just drop her in. And I'm going to move this. Okay, so now I'm going to Control T and then grab the corner and hold the Shift key as I'm moving her to resize so that we maintain the aspect ratio and she doesn't go all wonky. It's not a terrible selection by the refine or by the quick select tool there. And so we're going to place her right about there, I think, because we want the eye line to be believable, and she's looking right at Santa there. She might be a little bit small, so we'll increase the size, maybe back her up a little bit. Bring her down a little bit. Santa's quite tall, as you can see, so I think that I'm going to use her face size with regard to his face size to get the size correct and make her not look too small or too big. And I think that, you know, a 2-year-old would be about this size. Okay, so I clicked on the checkmark key to approve my sizing, and then I'm just going to move this out of my way. Photoshop keeps updating, and the updates aren't always my favorite. Some things improve and some things get worse. Okay, so we have quite a lovely selection around her, except for I'm seeing a bit of opacity right here on her forehead. So I'm going to click on her layer mask, and I'm going to go ahead to the white brush to brush back on where Photoshop removed it. And I'm just using a soft round brush. to paint it back on. There's a little bit of opacity on her mouth, and those are things we definitely want. Pardon me. You can see there's a bit of sloppy selection here, so I'm going to use the X key to flip over to the black palette to brush away what I don't want from the original image. And there's some of this rail missing, so I'm going to flip back over to the white to paint it back on. And then back over to the black brush. Paint away the parts of the original that we don't want there. So there's a bit of a missing leg here, so I'm going to flip back over to the white and paint that back in. And there's a bit of the wood showing here, which we don't want. All in all, a pretty darn good selection. Let's back up. So I'm just going to pull left on the magnifying glass to zoom out. And if you want to zoom in, these are like just little quick keys to make your life easier. You pull right to zoom in. I'm going to hit the space key to bring the hand up, and I can move around my image that way. I see here that I missed part of this leg, so I'm going to go ahead with the white while on this layer mask and paint it back. And let's just paint a little too much back so that you can see, and then I'm going to lower down my brush, hit the X key to flip it back over to the black and paint it away. Okay, oh, and I see here there's a little bit of the original backdrop in there too. And a little bit of this leg is missing, so I'm back over to the white to paint it back on. And then black again. White again. Make sure we have everything in here. Okay, so you might be saying to yourself, good, but she's floating. And you're absolutely right, she is floating. So the way to remedy that is to add some shadows. I think we also need to move her down a little bit. And then I'm going to rotate this chair, even though in the original she is, let's look at the original here. She is leaned forward in the original. I might rotate it just a little bit to make life easier when we're doing the shadowing. So Control T, oh, I need to be on her layer, Control T, and I'm going to come down to the right hand corner here, and then the rotate shows up, and I'm just going to rotate her ever so slightly to land her in this backdrop a little bit more believably. So, adding shadows. There's a few different ways you can go about adding shadows to this backdrop. And I'm going to show you one of the ways that I do it, and then I'm going to show you another way to do it. So here's how you could do it very quickly in this backdrop. I'm going to take the background layer, which is the backdrop itself, and then I'm going to duplicate it. Now I'm going to hold down this layer mask, and I'm going to hold down Alt so that I bring up a black layer mask so that everything's hidden right now. Then I'm going to go to multiply. Now, multiply will darken the areas that you paint on. So I'm going to come over here to the white and take a large round brush. Use the right bracket key to increase my brush size. And I do have the brush at 100%, and that's going to really make a difference here. And what you can do, you can either turn down the opacity and flow on your brush, or you can also turn the opacity down on the layer. It's completely up to you. I do both alternatively. In this case, I want 100%. I want to see exactly what I'm doing with the shadowing. So I'm just going to click on here. Boom, we have a shadow. Already she looks more landed in this backdrop. There would be a shadow on the wall behind her because the light is coming from here. So we're going to click one there. And then there's absolutely going to be shadowing. I'm left bracket key to lower the size of my brush. Absolutely would be shadowing underneath these legs. So I'm just tapping it in there. And I don't love the way that looks. So I'm just going to back up in my history palette here. And I'm going to make one stroke with my brush. And same thing here. There would be shadowing under here. And you might be saying to yourself, those are very hard shadows. And you're right. And we can soften this up very easily by heading over here to the opacity and softening up the shadows. Now, if you feel like she's still floating, no problem. We can fix that by adding another technique, or we could try. I'm actually going to go back and use another technique here. So I'm coming back up to where I had duplicated this layer, and I'm going to turn this down to about 40% on both flow and opacity. And then I'm going to come in here, and this way you can build, and then if you like, you can still turn the opacity down on this layer. Sometimes the quick solutions work and sometimes they don't, and I like to keep the mistakes in these tutorials so that you can learn along with me. So I'm just going to add shadowing in here. I'm going to build it up, and there would be quite a bit of shadowing because there's her entire body casting a shadow here, and there's also the chair. So you want to come in behind the chair, and there's going to be a lot in here. I'm just tapping these in. And now I'm going to make my brush smaller, and there'd be quite a dark shadow right underneath the leg, and then less so as you get a bit of distance from the floor. And same in here. So just going ahead and creating those shadows. Be a shadow there. Oh, let me back that up. There'd actually be a shadow coming this way a bit. And if you don't like something, you can go ahead into your history brush, or sorry, your history palette, and go back a step. You can always come in here. You can flip the layer mask over to black and paint off what you don't like. I think I need a little bit more diffuse shadowing here. I'm going to add a little bit more here, and then I'm going to increase my brush size and just tap a little bit in there. And now we've really landed her in this backdrop. There's a little bit of heavy shadow here, but that's no problem because we're using a layer mask. So I'm going to flip over to the black again and just tap here to remove some of that. And I feel like this part of her chair is a little bit bright. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a bit of a shortcut, and I'm just going to use the burn tool. Here's your burn tool. I'm on her layer, the layer with the chair, and I'm just going to burn into that chair a little bit. I found it a little distracting to have it so bright there. All right, let's back up, and I'm going to show you. I think we do need to add a bit of shadow on this side, pardon me. So back over to the white, and I'm going to increase the brush a little bit here using the right bracket key, and I'm just going to tap along here. And I'm going to lower it down and make a little bit harder of a shadow there. Okay, let's back up and take a look at that. I like that. There's a bit here that I don't love, so again, I'm going to go back in. I always like to back up from my composites, and when you're zoomed in, you can't always tell if something's looking good or looking right or believable or whatnot. And so I always back out and come back in and back out, and it does seem tedious, and there can be some tedium to doing composites, but the best ones, when they're done right, are a little tedious. So there is a bit of a, it's just annoying me here, so I'm going to see if adding back in some of this chair will help. And so I'm going to head over to her layer mask and the white brush, and I'm just going to build in some of that chair back, and that drop shadow will really help. So I'm actually cheating a little bit of the shadowing from the photo of her. And again, that's why it's so important. Well, not so important, but just makes it so much easier if you shoot on something similar to what you're trying to composite into. So let's back up again. Pretty happy with the shadowing there. I think what I'll do is just turn off the shadow layer so that you can see the difference. There she's floating. There she's landed into the backdrop. I think we'd probably want to add a little bit more shadowing in here, but we're pretty close. So a nice big fluffy brush is going to help here just ever so slightly to land her a little bit more. Beauty. Okay, so if this is all you're looking for, I think that you could probably click off of this tutorial. I'm going to do a few more things here, like talk about adding some lighting into this book and whatnot, but I think we do have a very believable composite right here that hasn't taken all that much time. And that's key. You don't want to be spending too terribly much time in Photoshop if you're going to be doing these composites for your clients, more than one. If you're doing 10 or 20 or 30 of these, you absolutely want to speed them up a bit. I would like to thank you all for watching this tutorial, and for those of you who want to stay tuned, let's continue. So we do have a very believable composite right here. I want to show you another technique. I'm going to turn off this shadow layer, and I'm going to go back to her layer. And this is where you can use the fact that you shot on the same or similar wood to your advantage and really speed up your editing process. So I'm back on her layer. I'm using my brush at 40 and 40, soft fluffy brush, and I'm just going to tap around her. And this is bringing out the background that I photographed her on. So no need to create shadows, they were part of the background. Now I'm blending her image into the floor here. And I'm just tapping and blending. So very quickly, as you can see, that was quite fast, and I don't like the angle here, so I'm just going to tap out some of her layer. But very quickly I have a believable composite. She looks landed in this image. It's sort of a quick and dirty way to do it. Again, if you're doing a whole bunch of edits for your clients, then that will really help. So let's just go up and see this without and then with. All right. Okay, so I do see one thing here that happens quite a bit when you're using the quick selection tool, and I've missed it many a time when I'm doing editing. The quick selection tool, as good as it is, will often leave this box around your selection. And it's a very fine line and you can very easily miss it. So now that I see it, I'm going to remove it. I'm on her layer and I'm going to go ahead, turn up to 100% and just paint it off to make sure I don't forget it in there, because I have done that. It's quite embarrassing. Okay, perfect. So we're going to go ahead and add back the shadows, that shadow layer, because I actually like it better than just blending with her. And we're going to talk about adding light to this book. Now, there are lots and lots of overlays out there on the internet. I don't include this, or Christopher does not include this with the purchase, but there are many overlays available to you on the internet, on Etsy, and they just bring a bit of life to the image, and then you can flavor to taste. Maybe you want a whole bunch of sparkles and lights added into this backdrop, and certainly that's up to you. You can do so many things with these, and you could make this an HDR image if you want to, if that's your taste. You can really go over the top with it. And again, it's totally up to you. I think it is quite magical to add some lighting in here, and that would be my preference. And I think just to show you one more thing here, I'm going to remove these two layers, or I'm going to hide these two layers, and I'm going to show you another pose here, because certainly you don't have to use a prop. We've got this little lady, not on a prop, she's just on the floor. Same thing, I'm using a background of wood, not the same, but very similar to the wood, and the wood is going in the same direction. As you can see, it's a paper backdrop, it's a little warped there, but no big deal. I would just cut her out the same way and place her on the floor the same as I had with this little lady in the chair. So at the very end, I think it's always nice to add a levels layer or a curves layer on top of all of this scene to make the light really blend. So what we can do here is a levels layer, and this is going to apply to everything below it. We're going to just add a little bit of highlight or to the midtones, and same thing to the highlights, and we're going to just bring a bit of contrast there. And you can also use a curves layer if you like. Just pull down into the shadows and pull up into the highlights for that contrasted look that so many people really, really like. And you can finish it up any way that you want. Maybe that's a little too contrasty. You can turn off that curves layer. Maybe you want to turn off the levels layer. Entirely up to you. Flavor to taste. Have a good time. That's the beauty of compositing. Everybody's going to be doing it differently, and keeps life interesting. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope it helped, and everybody have a fantastic day.